Hello, everybody, and welcome to Culture and Convictions. I am Iron Petrie, along with my wife, Star Petrie.
Hey, everybody.
And we are glad to once again be with you on this another edition of Culture and Convictions podcast, where we are all about the culture and trying to preserve what culture we have left by returning to our convictions. And so we deal with everything on this podcast from, you name it, politics, arts and entertainment. We touch it all. Law, health, you know.
You never know. You just open the box up and you're like, oh, a surprise.
Yeah, Culture and Convictions is like a box of chocolates.
That's right. You never know.
You just never know what you're going to get.
Never know.
But we're going to give it to you straight the way we see it. We're going to give it to you straight the way we feel it and believe it. And so we're just happy to have you at our table once again. Well, what's been going on?
So I wanted to start off the show talking about Seattle Police Chief, or soon to be retired Police Chief, Carmen Best, because I thought it was just a really interesting story, considering all the turmoil that's gone on in Seattle. And,
yeah, they've had some problems.
And looking back on, just really the deficiencies of the local leadership. And, we've talked about this on the podcast many, many times before. The issue is one of, come on, guys, these are the people that we've sat back and we've grown very accustomed to their tomfoolery. And we probably dismissed it as just, it's what politicians do. But at some point you think, no, we're going to have to demand better. We're going to have to demand better. Because if we don't, we can't keep living like this. So Seattle, of course, has gone on a roller coaster ever since George Floyd's death, and certainly all of the protests that sparked up across the country. But in Seattle, they took it to another level with the establishment of CHOP and
Chaz and CHOP and all these different... They can never figure out who they wanted to be.
I don't know. But, when you think about this idea that we're going to hunker down, we're going to take over, and we want the local government to assist us by putting up these barricades and giving us our own little private piece of dominion here in Seattle, and we're going to call it CHOP. And to watch the police officers basically be told, sorry, this is a no police zone.
Yeah.
We don't want you here. Yeah. I think it really speaks of just the kind of foolishness that has continued to go on in our country, where we sit back and we allow people to do things based on this idea of, well, they just want to express themselves, and they really, they're just experimenting and they're just trying something. No, they are completely and fundamentally giving the middle finger to all Americans based on the standard of living and the type of living and the society that we've created, right? A nation of laws, not of men.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The thing about that whole situation that happened in Seattle to me was encapsulated in one event. And that was when they were all down there and they had, ironically, erected all of this crap. That's the
it was just crap.
That's the only way you could say it, was just a lot of crap. Little men, some makeshift barricades and stuff, and they had accumulated all this stuff on a particular street to kind of form off an outline of where CHOP begins and everything else ends, right? And there was this guy that came down one day and he had enough.
Oh yeah, he was mad.
He had just had enough, and he came down. And he wrecked that place like Jesus in the temple.
He did.
I mean, seriously.
He was turning over tables for sure.
That is no exaggeration. He was flipping over tables and everything because, and I say that encapsulates the whole thing to me because that person kind of expressed the level of tomfoolery. Yeah. I think everybody kind of felt and had in mind of what they were trying to do. But it was such a display of government negligence and just absolute abdication of responsibility as a leadership, that your citizen, a disgruntled and upset citizen, where these people have invaded his space where he lives, where he's trying to have a livelihood, and they've piled all this crap up there, and they're living, and they're just making shift. They got this little hollowed out place in the middle of Seattle, and he has to come down there and regulate. I'm serious. It is the epitome of just how weak the leadership was, because the citizen should not have had to come down there to do that. Mm-hmm. He should have not have come down and expressed that level of anger, and should not have had to be. His leaders, the people that he elected, the people that are serving him, should have been there to do that for him, because those people had no precedent whatsoever to be doing some of the stuff that they were doing. But, they get what they get. This is what they voted for. This is what they wanted. This is what these people have. And what I'm hoping will happen is people will have an epiphany to break from this identity politics, this policy loyalty. I mean, not policy loyalty, but this loyalty to party, and really begin to understand there's stuff that just doesn't work. And it's time to jump ship. It's time to abandon this kind of nonsense in our voting and in our civic engagement. It's nonsense, people. It doesn't work. Stuff just doesn't work. You cannot do this. It hasn't worked in other nations in the world. It won't work here in America. We're no special people different than other human beings all over the world. We're not. Yeah. Our form of government is unique and exceptional to all other nations of the world. But we as human beings are not. And should we choose to abort or to walk away from that form of governance and try to do something like everybody else based on our elevated humanity, if you would, you get CHOP.
Yeah.
You get Chaz. You get whatever other iteration it's going to be.
And it should be said that, the Capitol Hill organized protest did not last very long. I mean, they were here today and they were gone tomorrow, because ultimately that kind of anarchy just will not allow anyone to live in peace. And so that's why there were 2 homicides. There were numerous allegations of sexual assault. And it's one of the reasons why the mayor had to move in and finally, coalesce and say, okay, fine, we're gonna go in there and we're gonna do what we should have done, 10, 15 days ago.
Absolutely. And it serves us well in our country, not what happened, but so that we can see these things and see them writ large, because for so long, people have fostered these ideas in clandestine meetings where they get together, the people against the powers that be, and we're going to topple Western civilization, and we're going to topple this empire and that. But now when people are given the freedom to express that out in the middle of the street, and they give them a block or two to do it, and they get out there and they act a plumb fool, and you see that, look, you can have all these little crazy ideas you want to, but certain things will not lift humanity, and they will not lift people. And we just need to be smart about it and be wise and bold about it.
So, of course, everything that was going on with CHOP and all of the disruption that so many cities had encountered as a result of all the protests, Chief Carmen Best is I think, a casualty. And really, it's unfortunately a loss for the city of Seattle to see their police chief, because I think that hurts morale. I don't think that, irrespective of whether she had been fired, the fact that she's resigning, like, I can't do it. Yeah, and she's probably at that point where I can't hold my tongue anymore, right? Yeah. At some point, you're like, look, all professionalism is about to leave. Exactly. I'm about to just tell these people exactly who I believe they are. But also the interesting thing is that, Chief Best is an African-American female. And everybody's very, big on African-American females now that Kamala Harris is VP.
Sure. So
I just want people to think about this, and we're going to play this video and come back and talk about it. But if Black lives really matter, it's interesting that, hers was of no account.
Yeah.
An extraordinary news conference.
I'm done. Can't do it.
Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best abruptly retires and simultaneously tees off on the city council.
Well, it's ridiculous. Illegal, by the way, but also ridiculous. And so how else am I supposed to feel? There's a whole room full of department heads in here, and not one of them was named, just me. So yeah, I take it personal.
So what she's talking about is that the city council conspired and got together to have a private meeting in which they wanted to discuss salaries, but not everyone's salaries. Not every department head was brought up, just one.
Wow.
The lone Black female.
That's crazy.
And they originally,
that is just crazy.
The talk was, we're going to cut this salary by 40%. Can you imagine?
It was wasn't it like 6 figures?
They were going to cut it by 40%. Yeah. And they ended up just taking $10,000. But even with that, in the midst of COVID, in the midst of protest, in the midst of CHOP and Chaz, the fact that you would then come and swipe her across her face by getting together, behind closed doors to make a decision in that way. And that's why she was saying it's illegal, because obviously we're going to make a motion like that. Yeah. We make it public and we allow the citizens of the city to come and hear what it is that we're proposing to be done. We don't go behind closed doors and then just try to, make it happen. So what you see here, though, is a pattern of disrespect not just for Chief Best, but for the police officers that serve with her, because it was not only her salary that was impacted, but it was also the salaries of some in her leadership. So it was interesting that the only department that got touched or bothered was the police department. And so the question is for Seattle, I mean, how much longer are we going to allow these nincompoops to sit there and make these types of decisions that are ruinous to your city? And then you add to that, I think it was early August, maybe the first week of August, there were about 40 cars that showed up in Chief Best's neighborhood. Yeah. Antifa types who were all mic'd up and radioed up, talking on, organized, getting ready to cause some type of trouble. So what public servant wants to have to deal with something like that and wants to be harassed in that way?
Oh, to be just tossed under the bus.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, to just be really used as a sacrificial lamb to the prevailing narrative of defund the cops and all of this other stuff that emerged during this time. And kudos to her. I'm serious. Kudos to somebody who's willing to just stand up and, as she said in her news conference, can't do it.
Can't do it. I'm over it.
I'm over it. I'm done with it. And walking away and not being this sacrificial lamb for people for a false narrative. Yeah. For something built on a lie, something that is not even statistically, empirically supported. And so we're running around dismantling things that have not even proven themselves to need dismantling. When policing has been improving now for decades, when it comes to these fatal shootings and deaths in custody and so forth and so on. And you sit back and you scratch your head, and like I said, that's why I say kudos to her, because I keep looking at these things wondering, when is somebody going to say enough's enough? When is somebody going to actually stand up and say, forget it. I'm done with this whole charade. I'm not following with this anymore. I'm not going to be a part of the circus anymore. Right. I'm going to turn in my costume. I'm done. I'm finished.
But people are just sort of riding the wave, right? And so like you said, that the defund police mantra came out, and then people feel like, oh, now we're really going to do something. We're going to shock the world. We're going to go out here. We're actually going to do it. And we don't care about public safety. At all. You know what I mean? As long as we feel safe. I mean, the rest of you guys, I mean, who really cares what happens to you when you go home at night? And that's basically the message that they sent. But that's happening across the country. And the conversation continues to be had because obviously people are on this progressive train to nowhere and feel as though these new experiments in public decency and public safety need to be had at everyone else's expense. Right? Oh, yeah. While they sit back at their homes talking about defund police, it's not, they're not the ones that are having to live in those neighborhoods and deal with the crime and the degeneration that surrounds, in some cases, these liberal bastions of thought and policy.
And you look at all of the crimes since all of this has come to fore. You look at the rapid increase in homicide and in violent crimes in these places.
Yes, sir.
And you don't think, no different than in Chicago, just a few moments, not too long ago, where it was moments where a young man was shot by a police officer. They're still under investigation as to what was going on there. But these people come out, and people are all over the place. And the police, the police chief, or the gentleman, he used to be in Dallas, and now he's in Chicago. He's trying to help them kind of clean that place up there. He was talking about how these criminals, these elements go out there because they felt as though there were not going to be any consequences to their actions.
Sure.
Now, that's an indictment. That's an indictment on the mayor there in Chicago. That's an indictment on the powers that be there in Chicago, that these people elected you. And I promise you, the people that elected you, that put you in office, are not the people out there trying to burn something down.
No.
Those people don't vote. 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
People running around burning things down and trying to riot and pillage and steal. And you're sitting here letting people be just be a prey to a bunch of nonsense and sit back and do nothing and equivocate and make excuses and give eloquent little reasons and get defensive if somebody calls you out on it. And so for people like Miss Best, whom I tremendously respect for doing what she did, I pray that there are more like her. because you have to call the lunacy on the carpet.
Yes, you do.
You have to call them on out and say,
I
okay,
see that.
let's meet at high noon and see just how truly true to your convictions you really are.
Sure.
Because you're really not. You're just playing political games and theater with people's lives.
Yes.
With people's lives.
And the thing about it is, lunacy does not lead to better leadership. All of these things that we're doing, trying to bend what we know is the human condition, which is pride and selfishness and the want to take something and get something for nothing. I mean, those things will not leave humanity just simply because you think that they should, or because you feel like, well, if we give them their own little play area, they'll play nice. That's just not the reality.
That's not the reality.
But what does happen is that, good people leave.
Yeah.
Because good people they cannot stomach the same type of idiocy that they continue to have to deal with on a regular basis. It's like, I gotta go for my own sanity. And so that I don't become like y'all. Because what you're trying to do is pull me down too, and I'm not going, dang it.
That's true, though.
I mean, people are like, hey, I'm hanging on to that rung of sanity. I ain't going down there with y'all.
That's very true, though.
So.
It reminds me of a line, it was Rambo back in the day, when Stallone, that drawl he had, and he was in Rambo First Blood Part 2, and he was talking about war, and he's talking about in order to survive war, you got to become war. And really, it's a truth.
Yeah.
It really is a truth.
So.
And that's why, like you said, people they bow out and they say, I got to go. Why? Because you start to feel as though in order to deal with this mess, I'm going to have to come out of character.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to have to come out of my own personal civility. I'm going to have to start dealing with stuff
just
that
cutting people.
Yeah,
I don't want to do that.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But she did it a little bit in her press conference.
She did.
She was like, since I'm leaving,
let me just drop this off.
let me tell you what I feel.
Sure.
No, but kudos to her. Really, absolutely kudos to her for being, for standing up for herself and really calling the lunacy for what it was and not being their sacrificial lamb. Because this defund the police stuff it's getting out of hand.
That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And here's the deal: we're gonna kind of transition into talking more about policing, just in a general sense. But the idea that people will feel better knowing that when they call 911, they're going to dispatch the psychologist as opposed to the police is complete. I mean, who are these people who get to write the fairy tales of human nature? I mean, seriously, who get to sit back and say
the fairy tales of human nature?
I mean, they get to say,
so
here's what's going to happen.
Get to make up an idea of man.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be in the house and he's going to have that gun and he's going to be telling you, get on the floor, be quiet. And he's going to call us or you're going to call us and he's going to want to try to exchange you for money. But this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. We're going to call the best psychologist in town. We're going to have him come down here and he's not going to leave until he talks him out of it.
Yeah.
Who writes this? These are not movie scripts. These are people.
Yeah. It reminds me of that Thomas Sowell line, abstract people in an abstract world.
Yes.
Because that is the way a lot of liberals are.
Absolutely.
They do. They have this prefabrication in mind of how things should be, how things ought to be. And and it's okay to have a dream about how things ought to be. That's fine. We all have that in some degree or another.
Right.
But you don't make policy based on how things ought
to be.
Because you have to make it based upon how things are. How have human beings proven themselves to act and behave throughout millennia?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
We do have a record here. We're not pulling anything out of the sky, right?
No.
We don't have to guess how people are going to act and how human beings tend to behave. We've got the record. So that's the problem with them, but they can never come out of that.
Yeah,
They're unwilling to.
It's look at these peaceful protests. I mean, these peaceful protesters.
Stuff is
it's all your
burning.
Peaceful protesters. You're thinking
stuff is burning.
I'm
But
like,
that newscaster, I remember one guy, he's like, I mean, for the most part, these protests have been pretty peaceful and stuff is burning.
Yeah, while he's looking behind himself like, let me get up out of here.
Nothing burns in peace. I'm sorry.
I'm with you.
I mean, did it catch on fire because a toaster oven? What? Yeah, I mean, people, come on.
Just an insurance situation.
Come on. It is just absolute ridiculousness.
Oh, yeah. But this is where we are in America, though, and this is why we're going to be held accountable. Because when things are just that blatantly stupid, that blatantly irrational and irresponsible, come on now. I mean, you just can't sit back and act like I had no idea he was headed to that cliff.
Yeah.
I mean, we were cruising one minute, listening to tunes on the radio. I thought everything was fine.
Yeah.
No, the bridge is out. It's been out.
Yeah, it has.
Right? You've been on this track for a long time, America, and at some point.
And there are signs telling you.
Absolutely.
That the bridge is out.
Absolutely. And you keep saying, no, this is we're okay. We're headed in the right direction. No. Right? It's like the Abilene paradox. Nobody really wants to go.
Nobody wants to go, but we're all
just like, I guess it's all right. It'll be fine.
We're all headed there.
But I want to play a clip from Tyler Perry. And he's talking about policing. And I thought it was interesting, one, because, Tyler Perry is an African-American male, black male. And then two, because he's a celebrity. So he's going off the beaten path a little bit.
When there's a large movement within protest movement of defunding police, Republicans are focusing on that as saying that, that Democrats want to do away with police departments, which I don't think is what defund police means. But when you hear that slogan, what do you think?
Well, when I first heard it, I was troubled by it. I thought, okay, this is going to be weaponized in this political year. I completely thought that was happening. That's exactly what's happened. It's been weaponized. But I did some research, and what I would challenge people to do is to do research on find out what it means. Now, you got to understand this. I'm not for taking money for the police department. I think we need more police. My studio is in a neighborhood where I think we need police, but we don't need police that have or that are undertrained. And you got to understand, I have really close friends who are police officers that I love dearly, who are really good people who have been very, very hurt by this as well. And here's what I want you to understand, Anderson. Where there's wrong, I'm going to stand up against it. When Rashad Brooks was murdered, I thought that was wrong. When George Floyd was murdered, I thought that was wrong, like so many other people. But when a police officer who was white in a suburb in Atlanta was shot in the head by a shoplifter, I thought that was wrong too, and I reached out to do what I can to help his family. When Sequoia was 8-year-old was shot near the Wendy's in her mother's back seat, I thought that was wrong too. So anywhere there's wrong, I'm going to stand up against it. I just don't believe that, and I believe that I don't believe that there are lots of people. Let me just change that to understand that there are a lot of people in America who feel the way that I do, right? I think we need the police. I know that I need the police. I have several that work for me here at the studio. We need them, but we need them reformed. We need them trained well. We need the right structure, right? But some of the things inside of defund the police, I really understand, like having officers who are clinically trained to deal with certain situations. I think all of those things are helpful. But taking money from the police department to make the police department smaller, that troubles me.
So interesting to hear that from him. But I think also very true what he said, that most of America probably, I'm sure, goes home and says, look, I get it. Are there bad actors? Sure. There are bad actors when I go to Walmart. I don't necessarily like how that cashier checked me out, but it happens. You know what I mean? People are there. So, and the same is can be said about the police department. So we can't just broad stroke and say, oh, it's everyone and it's a systemic problem, because it's not. Yeah. It's not. It's just not. But at the same time, there's an appreciation for the fact that they provide a level of they provide a buffer between me and the reality of human capacity to harm, hurt, steal, pillage. Yeah. And that's the reality. So we can't act as though if we get rid of the police, suddenly people, like I said, become saints. They become angels. Yeah. Because now that you don't have the police, I really want to play nice. Yeah. That's just not the way it happens.
No, that's not the way it happens. And he talked about this whole defunding the police and looking it up and everything. And I was just kind of, everybody says, well, first we need to understand what they're saying. They're saying defund the police, but defunding the police does not mean defunding the police. And so they go on to then say it has a more sophisticated and nuanced meaning. Mm-hmm. Right, it is talking about the reallocation of funds, et cetera, for these more clinical interventions and interactions with perpetrators and so forth, and maybe some other things. And look, you and I have been on this podcast in the past. There's been so many of them that, I can't remember the exact one, but we've talked about policing before, and we've talked about where we felt like there are reforms needed. There are reforms needed, not defunding. And I say not even reallocation of money.
Right.
I mean, am I the only person that turns on my television and sometimes my news, and I see crimes being committed by people who are carrying weapons that are not mom and pop, I bought a pistol off the shelf.
No, they're not 6-shooters. They're not going out there with little pea guns.
Yeah, this isn't John Wayne's revolver.
No,
right?
Not at all.
These people have semi-automatic weapons. They're committing crimes with some of the most cutting-edge, high-velocity bullets and whatnot and what have you. This world is not, it's just not what it used to be. So the people who are sent to protect and serve, yes, should be held to a higher level of accountability.
Right.
Yes, they should be held to a high level of scrutiny in terms of evaluation, psychologically, et cetera, et cetera. I'm all for that. But they should also be given the ability by which to respond with overwhelming force.
Absolutely.
And I know people may think, oh, my God. No, you don't understand. I remember watching, this was several years ago, and I think this has happened more than once, and I'll let you go on, but it just came back to mind, where two gentlemen had put on body armor to rob a bank and got into a firefight with the police. And I forget what particular city this was in. And policemen died that day, got killed, because these men were so suited. They had armor on their heads, they had armor on the body, they had high caliber rifles and assault rifles and guns. They were loaded for bear. And they sit there, and they had evidently, decided between the two of them that they were going to die on that hill that day, that this is what they were going to go out doing in a blaze of glory. And people don't understand with elements like that in society and with the reality that we are a gun culture. We just are. And it doesn't mean you should take the Second Amendment from people, but at the same time, we are a gun culture. We have guns. There are guns, some of everywhere.
Yeah.
And because of that, you cannot have the people who are sent to protect and serve hampered in their ability to be able to defend innocent people and to be able to deal with these criminals, because the people are out there. Now, that's one of those things where there is there's really no solution. There's just trade-off to it, because it's the reality of what we have. It's the reality of where we live, and it's the reality of the fact that when a cop gets a call and he shows up on the scene, he has no clue. Everybody knows everything after the fact and is broadcast on the news, and we've seen the story, but he has no clue. She has no clue what she or he is coming up on.
Right.
And so we have to really think through these things and realize, I think reforms are needed. Reforms must be done. They have to be done. But this whole idea of defunding or reallocating funds and so forth and so on, I just think it's going down the wrong road. It not just in, you're just misunderstanding the definition of defund. No, I'm not. It's just the wrong word. It's the wrong way. That's just how I feel about it. It's just wrong-headed. It's wrong-headed thinking. No, reform, yes. Increasing evaluations, increasing accountability, body cams, all of the different things that we can do. Yes, but at the same time, this whole idea of defunding and so forth and so on, it's something played up by the very far radical left that they tried to jump on and use George Floyd as a Trojan horse to ram this down America's throat if they possibly could. Yeah. But I think the fruit and the repercussions of this, what we're seeing, now cops not being so proactive in their policing, cops somewhat withdrawing a little bit because the environment is the morale is so low in some cities.
Retiring at amazing rates that we haven't seen in a long time.
Absolutely, because the environment's so toxic. I mean, it's not about just being pro cop. Cops, I'm pretty sure cops aren't saying sing us a lullaby. I just think they're saying, look, guys, we do a job that for the most part a good portion of the human population
doesn't want to do.
Don't want to do.
They don't.
Come on now. Let's just be honest about it.
Absolutely.
They run toward things that the majority of us run from, and that is the life they lived. And in many cases, they get paid pennies for it.
Absolutely.
So I'm off the train with the whole defund thing. I don't think I need to understand it. I don't think it needs to be redefined. I don't think I need to investigate it. I think we need to change the language and let's speak with some common sense and some decency about really the reality of the world we live in.
Yeah, I think, the sad thing about it is that people don't realize the far-reaching effects that come as a result of such just mass propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is what this has been. And ultimately, you have people who are probably in the academy right now that haven't even graduated and are thinking, maybe I made a bad decision.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's not too late for me to just, go a different way. But ultimately, you poison the entire pool, and nobody wants to go in because everybody feels like, well, if I do, then I have to worry about people calling me pig or people being disrespectful or going into Starbucks just trying to get a coffee. And next thing I know, there's all kind of drama. And I don't even know these people. I don't even know those cops that did that the other night. I'm just simply trying to serve the community that I'm in. So I have a real concern for the country when we're so quick to just grab a hold of things, because we're not talking about it this podcast, but even the George Floyd situation, there is more to the story. There's always more to the story.
Always.
It's just like Rodney King. There was more to that story, and they let the city of Los Angeles burn.
Yes, they did.
Burn off of just a half truth.
Yeah.
So we have to be at some point we have to take back the reins of these political four winds that try to push us one way and push us the other way, and say, no, I think I'm just going to wait until I hear the whole matter.
Yeah.
How about that? Before we jump and say, people are killing folks, and I will say this: did he have to lean on his neck like that? No, he did not. He did not. But the reality is that we didn't know what had happened to lead up to that.
We had no context.
There was no context.
No.
And I'm not saying that context would have changed the outcome or that would have changed your opinion of what the officer had done. But what I am saying is that we have to be able to judge the fullness of a matter and not just simply jump to conclusions. Because what we've unleashed on the country is a bunch of Antifa-type thugs and terrorists who are tearing up people's homes and businesses.
Oh, yeah.
And no one seems to think that that's worthy of really talking about, in the sense that those who are in power in those cities don't really want to talk about that. They want to talk about, well, we understand why people are upset. No, I want you to talk about the destruction that's happening in your own backyard. Yeah. Don't sit there and try to tell me, why I should sympathize with the person who's throwing the bricks through the window. Yeah. Explain to me why it is that you feel okay to allow that kind of chaos to come to your city and just park.
Yeah. And explain to me what innocent people have to do with that.
No, exactly.
What does anybody have to do with that?
Nothing.
I mean, what do the people in any of these cities who are going about their lives have to do with what happens in an isolated incident somewhere via USA? They have nothing to do with that. The businesses that have been lost, the lives that have been lost, the money that has been lost, the livelihood that has been lost by people who had nothing in the world to do with anything, right? And we're sitting back making justifications. And it's like, is there nothing any more worthy of condemnation outside of being conservative? is there anything? I mean, seriously, is there anything no longer worthy of absolute, unequivocating condemnation? That's wrong. Let's stop it. Put an end to it. Because everybody is walking around like they're scared to say stuff is wrong. And it's like at some point we have to make a stand and push back. Because if we don't push back, these radical elements are going to just keep pushing themselves.
That's exactly
and they know no other thing than a force that returns push, right? You can't negotiate with an idiot.
Yeah, no, you can't.
And I don't mean that to be rude. That's just the truth. You cannot negotiate with fools. People say, man, people just. It seems like people just aren't in their right mind, and they aren't. There are people that are not in their right mind. There are people in this world who are off, and nobody wants to say that. But it's like, what? what has history taught us? Have we been living in a bubble? Have we been floating through time?
And amazing with the age that we're in, where people are now wanting to focus on mental health. And you're sitting there watching mental health cases on television and nobody sees it. So you're like, am I the only one?
Is that not a mental health case for somebody to be throwing a brick through an innocent person's business? That's mental problems.
That's mental problems.
So what's wrong with you?
It's all over your television screen. And people
You're
are like,
not to be supported for that. You're not to be understood for understood.
No.
Are you kidding me? And it's like we are sitting back and we are just swallowing some of the most poisonous psychology and pseudoscience and pseudopsychology and psychobabble to put up with this stuff.
It's like the Alexander Hamilton quote. I'm trying to remember it, but he said that a nation that prefers disgrace over danger is prepared for a master and will have one. And that's what we're creating, right? That we would prefer disgrace. We would prefer just watching them let stuff burn, baby, burn, throw bricks and everything else over than assuming the danger of having to say no.
Yeah.
Right? The danger is I'm going to confront your lunacy today, right now. I'm not going to let this get any further than what you've assembled right here. We're not pulling down statues. We're not breaking into people's businesses and looting. No, I'm going to put a stand right now. But without doing that, you're ripe for someone to come in and master you.
Yes.
Because you don't have any moral forbearance to even hold your ground.
That's right.
And hold a line, hold the standard. And so, again, it's very simple, America. Very simple. We have a huge choice to make, and we're getting ready to play some videos of the newly announced Democratic VP candidate. And we need to talk about these things.
Keep going.
We have to talk about these things
man.
because they are a threat, not to the democracy. I get tired of that word. They are a threat to this republic.
Yeah.
And you can't find and won't find another America. So while everybody wants to go experiment, I'm like, you can go experiment anywhere else. And in fact, I will seed you California. Is there anybody with me who will seed them California and say, go and have a great time?
They're already experimenting in California.
No, I'm serious. But that's what I'm saying. Let's build a wall. It'll be a beautiful wall. It'll go all the way around the state of California. And we can allow those.
Not the wall. Man.
We can allow those who want to play in the sandbox.
Yeah.
Of human conceptual ideas and
indulgence.
Absolutely. Yeah. And go right ahead.
You can have all of the abstract ideas played out you want. You can do whatever you want with the money and the budget.
Absolutely.
You can do whatever you want with the taxation.
Absolutely.
You can do whatever you want with the real estate. You can do whatever you want with the food pricing. And you can do whatever you want. Just go have fun. It's your sandbox. Here's a little startup money for you. Just don't ask us for anything else.
Yeah, it's a one-time deal. One-time offer.
Go and do it. And since you think your ideas are better, it's all on you. Mm-hmm. And just let them have it.
And we can just watch from drone footage. Be like, look at those idiots. I should stop using that word, but sometimes I'm just like,
look,
idiot.
Sometimes it applies. Once again, that is what is wrong with us in this PC culture. Sometimes words apply that are not nice because the people aren't nice. There's a such thing as evil, right? There's a such thing as calculating, evil, wrong, premeditated wrong, evil, premeditated desire to do something, off-headed. Yeah. It's just the truth. It is just the truth, and I don't know why we're sitting around here acting like it isn't so, especially for Christian people who believe in the personification of evil, also known as the devil. You know what I'm saying? We
have a hard time defining it, don't we? We're like, oh, that's not. I mean, they didn't really mean it.
Help me. We better play this clip. I believe this is this is newly. What is the proper word for her? Kamala Harris? Mm-hmm. She has now been nominated or she's been chosen by Joe Biden to be vice president if he wins the election in November. And she's talking about policing. I believe this is Meghan McCain who's talking to her about policing, and she's going to give you some of her views.
I just want to know from you, do you support defunding and removing police from American communities? And if not, why do you think there's such a hard time being differentiated right now between defunding and reforming police departments?
So, Megan, I think that a big part of this conversation really is about reimagining how we do public safety in America, which I support, which is this. We have confused the idea that to achieve safety, you put more cops on the street, instead of understanding to achieve safe and healthy communities, you put more resources into the public education system of those communities, into affordable housing, into home ownership, into access to capital for small businesses, access to health care regardless of how much money people have. That's how you achieve safe and healthy communities. And so we really do need to understand and reimagine what and how we can actually make and help make communities safe. Because here's the bottom line. If you contrast, many communities which have a heavy presence of police to middle and upper middle class suburbs in America, you will not see that presence of police. But what you will see families who have an income that allows them to get through the end of the month. You will see good public schools. You will see people who have access to health care and can afford it. You will see people who have jobs. And so this has to be the conversation, which is how are we going to be smart in achieving what should be our collective goal, which is that all communities are safe, and knowing that safe communities are usually safe because they are healthy because of a number of things, including the economy, including education, including access to health care. And that's how I think about this. In many cities in America, over 1/3 of their city budget goes to police. So we have to have this conversation. What are we doing? What about the money going to social services? What about the money going to helping people with job training? What about helping with the mental health issues that communities are being plagued with, for which we're putting no resources?
Okay, I'm going to let you go first.
What?
I'm going to let you go first because I just, she's a lady. I respect her, and it's just, the way I was raised and the way I was taught. So I'm going to be respectful and allow you to respond to her, even though I have some thoughts. I do have thoughts, but I want you to go first.
Well, no, I was just going to say, you lost me at reimagine. I don't think you have to reimagine anything about human behavior. I think we know the propensity of people. I think we know what works. I think the issues of reform on their face are probably not necessarily major overhaul corrections as much as they are the moral degeneracy that we as a nation have begun to stomach and applaud and make commonplace. I think that the people who man the police department are the same people who you go to school with, who you hang out with. They're the same. I mean, we're in a culture where morality is shamed, right? Anybody who wants to be somewhat kind of a prude about some things, but wants to have a certain level of shame about what is bad behavior, wants to have a certain amount of gratitude for where they are and what they have. All of those things are like, it's so old. That's so just back there. But the people who you have in leadership are a product of whatever culture that they have lived in and imbibed. And so I just don't know that reforms sound great, but in what way? Unless you're going to, I think you have to pay people what they're worth. I think you have to pay people also according to the risk that's involved in what they do. Sure. So I don't think $40,000 a year is enough for me to be running into a, burning building or running towards shots fired. That's just me, though. I mean, you know what I mean?
You mean that's not why you wanted to be a cop?
For those who are doing it, God bless you. But that's just for me. I don't know that I would have to really. I'd have to be led. I'd have to be led of the Lord.
It's like being a school teacher.
Oh, absolutely. So I think that overall, there's definitely, you can reimagine a lot of things. Like I said, there's lots of ways to come up with solutions. We can do that all day. We can just throw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks. Yeah. But what we really have to think about is what has worked, what is working. Have we tried that yet? I don't understand why we have to reimagine things. Just what is working? And if those things are working, have we implemented them? If we haven't, then let's start there.
Yeah, I guess my only thing is that I'll add to it is in listening to her, I never heard. It's almost like she kind of starts everything in the middle, as though there's a predestined amount of health in a community or money, or it's like, why are those communities safe? And why are, she said something about, if you take, for example, communities that have lots of police in them, why are they there? I mean, do police just decide to go to a place and congregate? Why are they there? Why?
Because crime is there. Because there's an opportunity for harm.
Exactly.
There.
There's exactly.
And
that's what I mean. You sometimes get this explanation where people they're talking about something that I don't know how to. It's like starting a book in the middle. They don't they don't start with chapter 1. Mm-hmm. They start in the middle of the book and keep reading and expect for you to kind of just listen to what I'm reading you. Yes. Right. And at the end of the day, no, there's a why behind it, and it's not because it's just more money. I mean, you take, for example, you've had some cities like D.C. at one point in their school system, they had some of the highest expenditures per capita in the country, and still had abysmal test scores, terrible behavior. The kids were not learning.
Right.
And so money doesn't mean one of the easiest things in the world to appear as though you are doing something about something when you ain't doing nothing
about nothing.
Is to throw money at it.
That's so true.
That is one of the easiest things in the world to do.
Yeah.
And it works sometimes with political speak, right? It works sometimes for the American public even sometimes. But it doesn't mean anything, right? And so, no, there is there's a human element that in some of these places requires the things we're seeing. And ghettos do not make criminals. No. Criminals make ghettos. Mm-hmm. Now, look, yes, I'm willing to take the unpopular stand. People need to stop just sugarcoating around stuff. Most of the people living in the hood are not criminal people. Right. There are people who, for whatever reason, cannot afford to live anywhere better, and they're having to make it happen where they are. They're not criminals. They're not thugs. But there are a handful of people who run around there and terrorize that place and make it terrible for people to live, so much so that many times those good people have to resort to doing things they don't want to do to just make it in these places.
Absolutely.
You see what I mean? And so,
absolutely.
And so if we're not serious about really calling things what they are, then what are we doing? And that's why, for her, God bless her. I'm happy for her being the VP and the running mate, but at the same time, you're going to have to speak clear to me. Mm-hmm. Don't start your story in the middle, because I hear you. Mm-hmm. I didn't used to be able to hear that stuff, but now I hear you. You're starting in chapter 6 when there's been 5 previous chapters. I need you to back up, and I need you to speak with some coherence about this issue, because this is serious business. People's lives are at stake in these places, and we need to stop making up mythology about the realities of what's going on in these neighborhoods that are high crime, high drugs, low employment, and they're serious. These things are serious. And if you care anything about the people who live in these neighborhoods, then you care enough to tell the truth.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
That's just the way I feel about it.
So we're going to move on, and we're going to go to now Joe Biden and hear what he has to say about defund the police.
You called him by his whole name in the last podcast.
Joseph R. Biden Jr.
I tell you.
Look him up.
You're something.
President, do you think that there would be a world where defunding the police would be the solution and getting some of these responsibilities away from police forces? Police in schools, police handling mental illness, police handling homelessness, etc.
Well, I think there are a lot of changes. They can take place, period, without having to defund police completely. Here's what I think's happened. You have well over 80% of the American people going, whoa, I didn't know this. I didn't know this was happening. I don't believe police should be defunded, but I think the conditions should be placed upon them where departments are having to take significant reforms relating to we should set up a national use of force standard. If they don't sign on to it, then in fact they don't get any of the federal money. In addition, that they have to demonstrate that they release all the data that relates to misconduct by police. That all has to be sent to the Justice Department. If they don't send it to the Justice Department nationally, they don't get funding. But as it relates to, for example, mental illness and homelessness and drug abuse and the like, many changes we can make. But For example, my daughter is a social worker. She has her master's in social work. The idea that she's going to respond by herself to a 911 call that says that someone is overdosing or someone has a mental problem and they're acting out, the idea of going by themselves is not rational to expect. Conversely, the cops shouldn't go alone. The cops should go with people who are mental health experts.
Yeah.
So, here's my...
Joe kind of gets it.
Well, here's my thing.
You don't want to get...
No, it's not that. I don't have anything personal against the man. I really don't. I really don't. But anytime I hear about national this, national that, I get concerned. It's kind of the same thing that they wanted, kind of pin Donald Trump in a corner and say, he should do something about this. It's like, y'all got all them echelons of leadership between me and your mayor. And you want me to come down there and fix your problem. Well, I'm not going to do that because you want me to fix your problem and you want me to take your blame too.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to, that's just an okie doke. So, but this national use of force standard, and here's my thing. I think we need to have a national use of policy standard that says if you write bad policy, what happens to you?
Yeah.
Right? Since you want to come down here on this level,
yeah.
You want to come down here on this level and you want to tell police how to police, I think that we should have a national use of policy standard because I'm so tired of bad policies getting enacted and the American people having to bear the brunt of it. Meanwhile, you're in Congress hanging out, chilling. You know what I mean? Going to the next meeting, the next presser, flying first class.
Oh, yeah.
Just saying.
That's the dark art of politics.
Isn't
right?
it?
That's the magicianship of politics, how to maneuver yourself in a position to receive credit but not blame.
Absolutely.
That's
absolutely.
And
no scrutiny whatsoever. Same thing. So you want any incident, any issue, you want that thing to be routed up to the Justice Department. Question, I want to know what y'all doing. Because I just have a feeling that Drain the Swamp wasn't just sort of this fanciful idea. I think there's probably a lot of stuff going on in Congress that if we knew the half, we'd be like, oh my goodness.
We'd be storming the
So
the gate.
all I'm saying is that while Mr. Biden sounds like, he's pretty rational about it. Yeah, but I want the federal government to stay in a very defined lane.
I just wanted to poke you.
Just saying. Stay in your lane.
no, but once again, people are having these conversations once again. Even the young man who's interviewing her, the comedian who has his own show. What is the gentleman's name?
Trevor Noah.
Trevor Noah. Even he says, talking about police and being in schools and dealing with all these different things. And I'm like, once again, okay, why are police at schools?
I don't know. I think they just want to hang out, say, hey, keep your grades up.
Do
well.
I'm sorry, but I can think of California, Florida, Kentucky, Colorado, Arkansas. There's a few other states in there who have had nationwide national news school shootings. I can think of drug-infested inner-city schools that are dealing with all kinds of gang violence, and
the whole nine.
The whole nine, right? We don't have to go into all of that. So once again, we're like I said, we keep talking about this without talking about it, right? And once again, it owes how can I say this? We owe it to these issues to be honest. If we're not going to tell the truth and talk about these things for real, then get off of television.
Yeah.
Just leave it alone, because at the end of the day, now I may be expecting too much of them. Maybe they don't intend to talk about these things.
Probably
like I
not.
tried to give Joe a little credit just a minute ago, and just to poke you. And maybe I need to stop that, because maybe I'm thinking too much of these people. Maybe it's just me. I'm the incurable optimist. But we owe it to the American people in these issues of our times. We owe them honesty. We owe them talking about them point blank and matter of fact. Right? And what we're dealing with in our culture and in our society, from the propaganda all the way down to the things that we're doing from a policy perspective.
And here's the deal. big government cannot and is not supposed to be involved in all of these matters.
No.
Just point blank, period.
Never.
And at some point, we're going to have to be honest about the conversations that we have a responsibility at the local level to stop putting in idiots simply because we don't want to be bothered.
You said that word again.
Sorry. But we deal with a lot of idiots, man. That's like Dwight. You just be like, oh my gosh. I mean, but anyway, I want to leave this podcast with a Milton Friedman quote, because I feel like this quote is we should tell this after every podcast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because this is an election year, and people need to be reminded that this is what we need to be thinking about. He said, I do not believe the solution to our problem is to elect the right people. Right? So we can get over that. It's not about finding the right person.
There's a revelation.
You can't find the right person. The important thing is to establish a political climate of opinion, which will make it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. Right? Because at the end of the day, they put their finger up and they figure out which way the wind is blowing.
Which way is it blowing?
Right? Because they want 4 more years or 6 more years or whatever it is.
Can't
right?
leave that cushy life.
No way. So unless it's politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing, the right people won't do the right thing either, right? Or if they do, they'll be shortly out of office. Wow. So the people who do try to stand up, the people who do try to say, look, no, this is not right, are the people everybody's like, oh, you about to get out of there. You know, you get 4 years and you're gone.
Yeah.
But yet you got people out there, you know, doing all kind of crazy stuff like Rashida Tlaib and what's the other girl's name?
Don't even start. That would be a whole nother podcast, and we wouldn't be able to land the plane.
Ethics matter, people. Ethics matter.
Absolutely, they do. Well, this concludes another podcast of Culture and Convictions. We are asking you to please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're watching on Culture and Convictions TV. So click the subscribe button in the bottom corner so that you can receive notifications on more of these podcasts as they become available. Look, we're just getting started and just getting warmed up. We trying to save a country, y'all. Seriously, point blank and period. We would love to hear from you. Leave your comments, your critiques, whatever, your questions, and we may even answer those questions here on the podcast for you. So we look forward to hearing from you. And so until next time, God bless.